Alright, so today we are going to review basic and advanced search and rescue operations. As you can see, this is on a new regional PowerPoint template. So regionally, we are trying to get together on some general topics that we're all covering, and we're leading the way on search and vent or isolate search. So this is a two-part created by myself and Lieutenant Meyer, and I'm going to be presenting part one, basic and advanced search, and he will be presenting part two, vent or isolate search and search beyond the door. And we've also had a lot of help from Jack Piper, Captain Chris Andrews, Eric Navarrete, and Ryan Savage. Both helped a lot with shooting updated footage. So very much appreciate everyone's help in creating this. I hope all the updated video is helpful to everyone to look at the demonstrations and to get a better idea of what we're talking about, not just reading it off a PowerPoint slide. So our objectives is to define search types, learn search objectives, learn search techniques, review and update previous search methodologies and mindsets, and relate the why, the how, and the anticipated result. So our search strategy. Our strategy should really start when those tones go off. A lot of decisions can be made right then when we're getting our bunks on and getting into the truck. When we're talking about dispatch information, is it known or unknown potential victims? Does dispatch tell us that we've got trapped victims or unknown? The time of day, is this 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, should very much change our strategy for search. Searchable space, we'll talk about the term searchable space in just a second versus survivable space terminology. Manpower and arrival sequence, are we a engine with 2 people and our medics at the hospital, or are we at full staff with a 4-person engine company and a 2-person medic unit? That's going to drastically change our capabilities. And then fire problem versus known victims. So we know that when we put the fire out, everything gets better, and that has to be considered and kept in mind when we're talking about search, vent or search waterless and stuff like that. So searchable space versus survivable space. Can I occupy the space with the training, gear, and equipment I possess? If the answer is yes, the space should be searched and every chance given to a victim. We've all seen those victims, EMS calls where we thought they had no chance, traumas, even some fire victims that we thought had no chance, and then they survive. So we want to give them the chance. We'll let ER docs, surgeons, and God sort out who's going to live and who's not, but let's give them the chance. So this concept is a change in theory, but not really in application. We're not advocating going in and searching places where we're going to get ourselves hurt. That is not the idea in this. It really is about giving some clear guidelines. Because what does survivable space mean to me, to you, or to the BC? It's all different, and it's not intended to change our risk. We're not saying that we should be going in places that flashovers occurred, that we're going to take common sense out of the equation. But we want to utilize something that is more objective than standing in the front yard and saying, nope, that's not survivable. So the searchable space concept gives firefighters a better criteria based on subjective and objective information, and based more on their skill set and their capabilities. A firefighter that's brand new may say that's not searchable, and for them maybe it's not, and that's okay. But another firefighter might say that is searchable, and we want them to search that space and give those people a chance. So it could be different, but the question is can you occupy the space with your training, your gear, and your equipment? If the answer is yes, we should search those spaces. The question we should be asking ourselves is this: if it was my child in that room, would you ask if it was survivable, or would you search if there was any way possible? And we all know the answer to that is we would search if it was at all possible. The difference is it isn't about you, it's about them, and it should be the same for any of our potential victims. So some statistics that should be driving our strategy. The typical time available for individuals to escape a growing fire following detection has decreased from 17 to 3 minutes, and that's a NIST study. So are more people becoming trapped? Absolutely. 46% of victims were found in bedrooms. Really important statistic, especially when we're talking about then enter isolate search. Should we be starting in bedrooms instead of starting in living rooms? And the answer is, based on some factors, yes and no. 17% of victims were found in family rooms, 10 in kitchens, and 10 in hallways. 76% of victims were found in low to zero visibility, which is an important statistic, and I put it in here because a lot of times we would say, and there's some people pushing out there, that these fires that are so nasty, filled with so many toxins that there's just no survivability. And this is saying that's not true. So 70% of the victims were found in low to zero visibility. 51% of those victims in the study survived. And so this is firefighter grab study. This is an active study. It's not a period of time. It is a study that changes by the day, where they're putting in firefighter grabs and creating these numbers. So we have to constantly review these numbers as they change. So it's not from 94 to 98 or 2012 to 2014. This is an up-to-date study. So it gives a really good picture of where and how we're finding victims. So our types of searches, again, some of this is going to be review, but we're just going to go ahead and run through it real quick. Standard wall search, oriented man search, VEIS and targeted, search off of a hose line, and search off of a tagline. So searching with a hose line, it's the lowest risk for us and it's safest for us in zero visibility. Unfortunately, it's the highest risk for the victims. It's slower. It's initiated from the place of lowest risk and ended at the place of highest risk for our victims. And it's manpower and work intensive for us. Its best application is that commercial building where we have low visibility, and that's our way out. Where we don't have walls to follow, we're going into a big open floor span. And typically I'm thinking of a firefighter down scenario more than we would be in a Lowe's building looking for victims. So again, yeah, limited landmarks, walls, doors, windows, that type of stuff. We should have a hose because that's going to be our only way to find our way out. And then searching for a known victim in an uncontrolled environment. If we don't have water being put on the fire in a commercial type application, we better have a hose line with us. So wall search benefits: most appropriate for a 2-person crew. The entire team is oriented, and it's an equal use of manpower. Its shortcomings: it's usually started at the point furthest from the fire and furthest from the area most deadly to occupants. And again, if we're talking about almost 50% of our victims are found in bedrooms, we're starting at the furthest point away from there and working there. So it's a duplication of effort sometimes. Officer is an active searcher instead of heads up, directing the search and monitoring conditions, tied to one side of the building until you make a complete circle. And then when 2 searchers enter a room, no one's monitoring the hallway conditions. Operation. Search is started from your entry point, choosing a left or right wall. Search team follows the wall and maintains contact by sight, sound, and touch. The search continues until you've covered both sides of the building. The search does a very good job of covering the outside of rooms, but can often leave the interior of rooms unsearched. So the oriented man search, which is the search that I advocate for anytime we have the manpower. Fire engineering has a great search video out, and same thing, they recommend this as the as the preferential search for a lot of reasons. So the benefits: it allows our officers to be hands-off, directing the search while monitoring the conditions, being the supervisor, not the worker bee. Ability to search for fire and life, starting the search at the location of the highest risk to our victims instead of the lowest. It's much more rapid once you understand it and know it, and then working multiple sides of a building at one time. So shortcomings: it is best with a 3-person crew. It's really hard to do with 2 people, unless we're talking about Venator search or something like that. So it is an advanced search technique that requires independent firefighters to make decisions without officer direction. So we are talking about putting a firefighter on the other side of a membrane and them basically making decisions on their own. It does require complete confidence in the oriented person. So you are relying on that oriented person to stay oriented, because you are maybe switching from right to left walls or right side of the hallway to the left side of the hallway. Its operation: it can and should be, if you're talking about on the fire floor, started at the fire room and working back, or from the egress working inwards if we're talking about above or below the fire floor. The officer, the senior firefighter, will be designated as the oriented man. This should never change unless performing outside vent or isolate search. So in Lieutenant Meyer's PowerPoint, he'll talk about switching the roles when you're doing outside VEIS and moving the ladder. Other than that, inside, the oriented man should not change, because they are, 1, the person who's designated as the search leader, and 2, we don't want that person to be confused. We don't want them to rotate positions and go from going around the inside of a room searching to now they're the oriented person. That's a recipe for disaster. The oriented man should maintain the tick and should be managing the search while monitoring the environment and the safety of the crew. The oriented man should send searchers in rooms on both sides of the hallway. The searchers should close the door behind them to maintain membrane from the IDLH. So we want to keep the bad stuff in the hallway, and for our own visibility as well as the viability of our patients. And then once we have that membrane, if we can open a window, preferably, if there's no heat, if we can't open it, then we should break it, and that's going to give us the visibility to do a rapid, good, thorough search. Prior to a researcher entering a room, they should leave a tool on the unsearched side of the door frame. So if you go in a room and find a victim and come out and the search team leaves, that tool on the upside of the door gives continuity to that next incoming crew. So they can go right to that tool and start where your search left off. And typically people say, I don't want to leave my tool outside of the room. So we're talking about, residential setting, 10 and 15, 10 by 15 foot rooms. If you have an issue, then that's what the oriented person is for, is they're going to get you out or get the team in. But if you need a tool, it's right outside that door. And then also, when you come out of that room, if the search team leader has advanced to the next door, the searcher automatically knows what direction they need to go. They come out, they find their tool, they start working that way, looking for their search team leader or the oriented person. And that's going to be a judgment call on the oriented man on how far they're going to get away from their searchers, how far they're going to spread them out. Realistically, we don't want to get searchers in 2 different rooms 10 feet apart, because if something goes bad, that's a long distance to travel to get somebody out of a room. So we want to stay fairly close. If the searcher finds a victim, they should call out, "Got one." The officer should reply, "Need help," and then command should be notified. So some people might think this is getting into the weeds. You're going to tell me what to say, and the reason is important. It's and we'll talk about room off of room and stuff like that. So if I'm the oriented person and my searcher is yelling and I can't hear what he's saying because we're in a fire, I am going to assume it's a rescue. So if he's yelling room off a room, or I'm okay, then that's going to confuse and slow down the process. I don't want to hear from him unless, one, he's in a bad way. So that's okay. If you're in a bad way and you're yelling for help, then good. Then I need to come in there. But other than that, I'm going to assume that it's a rescue, and that's important. We don't want to disrupt the search for the oriented person to come in and go, what was that? What do we got going on? So, got one, need help. If I hear somebody yelling, I'm assuming something went wrong or they found a victim. If it's a room off of a room, then the searcher needs to go back to the door and notify the oriented person they have a room off a room, or get on the radio and tell their oriented man that they have a room off room, which we'll talk about right now. So when a room off of a room, so you go into the master bedroom and you find that big bathroom with a big closet, you have to make the decision if you want to extend your search, and that should be based on some different things. How far are you from your oriented man? Is this potentially a closet or a bathroom? So when we think about, and we'll talk about this with VEIS, when we go to a door and we close a door and it's inward or outward swinging, that should tell us a few things. If we find we're in a room and we go in and we open a door and it opens outward, it's probably a small closet. And we're going to know that really fast as we start to reach in there and find it's one of those very small coat closets. If it opens inward, then it's potentially a large closet or a large bathroom. And then a decision has to be made. Am I willing to extend in there? Can I get it searched rapidly, or do I need to call for a second searcher? And that's going to be a decision everybody has to make on their own. If a decision's made that a second searcher is needed, contact your oriented man by radio or crawl back and make contact. Use the terminology, again, room off room. And that should mean the same thing to everybody. I need a second person. If I'm calling for a room off room, that means I need another person to go in and stay oriented while I go in or they go in and search this room off of a room. Again, we talked about this. Refrain from yelling back for a room off a room.
I'm sorry, your radio's broken. Can you go again?
Oops. Let's go back. Okay, so here's our video. So our scenario, fire suppression and primary search are happening on floor 1. You're assigned primary search on floor 2.
Conditions are low heat, medium wall smoke, hard air is at 3/4 plus. Back up.
so that was pretty much our oriented man search. So tagline search, something that we don't practice a lot. It doesn't have a lot of use because when you start getting into a place where you have couches and chairs or office furniture, when you're in a big box store and you've got aisles everywhere, the tagline just isn't going to be effective. So we will talk about it. You know, for RIT operations, sometimes it can definitely, if you're going directly to a firefighter, it can be a great tool, and we want to keep it in the toolbox. So our benefits is we're tied to the team. We have a low chance of becoming lost, and best in a large open area commercial. So shortcomings is that most commercial buildings don't offer space to perform this search. So the box stores with the aisles, this is going to be tough to do this. And it is an advanced search technique. If you know how to coordinate with multiple people with multiple ropes, which we typically don't have, then it can be better, but still has a lot of shortcomings. So waterless searches. Waterless searches are a valuable tactic that must be understood and practiced because there is an increased risk if we don't understand the how and the why. So our search team should bring irons, a hook, and a pressurized water can at a minimum. Search for fire while searching for victims. Know the expected time before attack team makes the seat. Know the attack team's intended tactics, i.e. a transitional A to C, offensive, whatever the case. So the question has been asked, why would we do this, a waterless search for fire instead of a hose line? And the answer that I think fits in a couple different applications. If we go to the Sacagawea, any of our multi-story occupancies, and we have a potentially incipient stage fire, and we need to start evacuating people, we're a lot faster to get there with a can than we are to do standpipe operations and lay hose. Not that that doesn't have a place and shouldn't be utilized in situations, but this also has a place, and especially we're talking about search above the fire floor. We can potentially find extension, and then even at a typical residential house fire, if we have a couple companies arriving at the same time and we have our attack team with a hose, we have a standby team, and we have a team that can be assigned search, if they go in the house the same time as a hose team, they're likely going to beat the hose team to the fire, and they need to get a search off and isolate if that's possible. So there's times when this has an application, and we should be getting searches off more aggressively. It should be really an initial thought that we need to get search done, not an afterthought. Regionally, talking to other agencies, it seems like we all have experienced the same thing where we get fire attack, we have ventilation, we have RIT, we have standby, we have backup, and we get the fire tapped, and then we call for a primary search way down the list of priorities when it should be not above fire suppression, but right equal to, right? Why are we there? Life. We're there for life. So, and if we don't do that, we're going to get burned. We're going to put a fire out and have, a ventilation team, people standing in the front yard, and then we're going to find a victim that we should have found 5 minutes prior. So, so again, search team should bring irons, a hook, a pressurized water can. We made it through there, sorry. So our tactics, a non-targeted waterless search. So we're talking about either we're going in and searching above the fire floor while suppression is at the fire floor, or we're going in ahead of the hose line. So search for fire and life. We're not checking for extension. That's later down the list. We should have a hose line if we're checking for extension, especially if we're opening walls and ceilings. There's a lot of LODDs from people opening those spaces, plenum spaces, in a environment that's in its LEL and ignites it and kills them. So we don't want to do that without a hose line. We want to find the fire seat, attempt to start at the seat and work back. If the room is searchable, we enter and isolate. The officer, the oriented person, holds the hallway. The can man applies water to knock the fire down and protects the searcher. Again, we're not putting fires out per se with water cans. Could you? Sometimes. But we are knocking the fire back, isolating the room, and getting the search off in the room that's most deadly to a potential occupant. So the searcher conducts a rapid search of the fire room. Once the search is complete, we exit, we isolate, we notify command and the TAC team to see the location, and we continue to search back. So no-go for waterless searches. On the fire floor with more than one room involvement. Above or below the fire with no water being applied to the fire. 0 visibility, 500 degrees at mid-wall, and the 5 or 5- integrity of the building. And this is what that should look like.
Command for 2011, we're ascending to the second floor for fire confinement.
Clear your copies.
We've located the seat of the fire, suppressed and confined on the Alpha Delta corner. Primary search complete in the fire room, continuing search back out.
Wait, copy.
So you can see we had a pretty raging cone fire there. Firefighter Savage had a ABC extinguisher, which we would obviously have a PWC. We just didn't have one available. So both searchers go in the room. Oriented person stays in the hallway, monitors conditions. The can man applies water to the fire while the searcher gets the search off. Once the search is complete, then it's time to get out of there. We're not trying to accomplish fire suppression. We're just knocking the fire down and getting a search off in that room. So general search practices. Calling out verbally while searching. Again, we want to call out. We also want to be careful that we're not confusing our oriented person if we're in a room that we're saying help. So we do want to call out, fire department, anybody in here. And then we want to listen. If we call out, we want to listen. Give them that second, just a pause every little bit. Do we hear anybody calling out? No running fans during search operations. That'll kill a search really quick. When beds are found, so we want to confirm there's no top bunk. And when you find a bed, the next motion we should make is basically taking your hand on top of the bed and bringing it straight up to make sure there's nothing above it. We don't want to miss a top bunk. And then, under it, behind it. 2x2 method covers maximum area, covers the middle of the room, so 2 forward, 2 out, as Eric demonstrated in our video. Defensive search operations. So we practice this at live fire, doing the read, doing our 5 Ls. So it should be conducted when the searcher finds a room that's greater than 500 degrees at mid-wall. So we take that same scenario, and when Eric opens the door, he gets 500 degrees at mid-wall. He says, this is not a pecan operation, and we go defensive. So he goes defensive, he hooks his foot on the door, he reaches in using the length of his tool, gives a quick search, just with the reach of his tool, looks under the smoke in the room. The can man should be putting water over him, just to, not going to make a huge difference, but it's all we have, so we're going to try to knock the fire back a little bit, and we're going to get out of there as fast as we can. Keep in mind our gear will withstand 17 seconds of flashover temperature, so we don't want to be in a flashover, but if we're in pre-flashover and we can get in and give a victim one last chance, then we want to obviously do that. If the room is flashed over, then, and especially if opening the membrane further could endanger potential victims or contribute to fire spread, then it shouldn't be conducted. And if it's in flashover, then we know victims are not going to be alive in that room. And again, it's not a searchable room, so we're looking at searchability. Once the search is complete, membrane should be closed. Command and the attack team should be notified of the location. So if by chance we're in a situation where we get a team out in front of the hose team, again, not super probable, but should be a tool in the toolbox. If we get out ahead of them and we find the fire, then we knock it down, we isolate it, and we notify them where it is. Hopefully they will be coming up right behind us at that point, and we'll continue our search backwards. So 2 in, 2 out. This is the whack, and it says 2 in, 2 out can be violated with a 2 in, 1 out operation if there is a known rescue. The caveat can only be utilized if the victim is viable. Known and viable can be very subjective terms that are used by the whack. Better questions to ask. Is the info about the potential victim firsthand? Is it probable that there is a victim based on the information that we have at the time? Instead of gauging viability without knowledge of interior conditions, a search should be performed if we can occupy the potential space with our gear, our training, and our equipment. Again, going back to searchability. But it goes back to the first question. Is there a potential for a victim? And if there is, then we go down to the second and look at, can we occupy the space? But we really should be considered buildings unsearched. Even when we have the person standing in the front yard saying, no, nobody's in there, my kids are at their parents', we still should have a high index of suspicion. Doesn't mean that we risk all, we still have to weigh good decisions, but we all know those situations where somebody said, no, there's nobody else in the car, and then come to find out they forgot they had their kid, and the trauma just, it was too much for them and they couldn't think. There's been documented situations where people got out of a fire and they said no one was in there. They thought their kids had gone to their dads for the weekend, and they hadn't. And the trauma was just too much. They didn't realize their kids were there. So we don't want to be caught in that situation. Again, we're not going to make bad decisions when we have somebody telling us that everybody's out, but we still should have a high index of suspicion, especially at nighttime when people are asleep, they're groggy, and they wake up to a fire, making them jump out of bed and crawl out windows, that they may not be thinking 100%. So our search myths. We talked about these last year. Number 1, we should chalk doors open so we don't get locked into rooms. Reality, if we can get into a room, especially when we're talking about residential, we can typically easily get out, and we still have that oriented person on the other side of the door. If there is a victim in a room, they may be alive because they had membrane. By chalking that door open, we're going to decrease their survivability, and we make it worse for us, worse for our visibility. So not a good plan. VES is dangerous. Reality. VES is no more dangerous than any other search, and in fact, currently they are not finding, going back, anybody, a firefighter, that's ever died doing a VEIS. VEIS can be dangerous if the buildings are not sized up correctly, and it can be dangerous if flow paths are not controlled and searchers don't understand VES procedures. Number 3, searches done without a hose line are dangerous. Reality. Hose lines make searches very slow and labor intensive. Waterless searches can be safe, they can be fast and efficient if crews are trained and well versed at these searches. Again, we're not saying that search doesn't have risk. It always has risk. But taking a hose line to do a search when there's already a hose line in the fire is putting our victims' safety well below ours. And, you know, for me, that's not an area I want to go into. The victim is still, they're our priority, and yes, there's risk, but if we understand it, we do it correctly, then we mitigate a whole lot of that risk. That's pretty much it, what I have for search, and then part 2 will be Lieutenant Myers, vent in our search, and vent in our isolate search, and search beyond the door, and then we'll have hands-on search training. Thanks.